It's not unusual to see thick fog in the San Francisco Bay, but nobody anticipates seeing heavy oil washing onto the shoreline. The Costco Busan oil spill caused an influx of spontaneous volunteers to launch into action to help clean up the local beaches. The information presented in this video is based on the prerequisite that you have already watched the Emergency Volunteer Center or EVC e-learning series Introduction and Basic Operations videos to discover the value of an EVC and its essential operating procedures. Based on this knowledge, you are now ready to learn the details of managing an EVC. A manager makes EVC decisions from start to finish. We'll review setup tasks and clearly define your role as an EVC manager. After this training, you will be able to foresee typical management issues that may arise. You'll be equipped with helpful tips and have a good grasp on the priorities that will aid in successful EVC management. Managing an EVC requires that you oversee all functions. This includes setup, day-to-day operations, assignment and supervision of lead EVC staff, and the process of demobilization.
During an event, you are managing the volunteers. You may be doing skills inventory. You're talking to other parts of the EOC to make sure that you're responding to their needs.
You're already familiar with the basics of EVC setup and layout from the EVC Basic Operations video, but here are some additional tips that can help. In the EVC Resource Kit, there are detailed location recommendations for an EVC layout and its series of stations. Consider this: as EVC manager, you have a responsibility to make operations as smooth as possible. Based on your existing knowledge of EVC stations, what layout aspects would you consider to better facilitate traffic flow?
During setup, we need to consider flow of traffic. We need to take into consideration where we are going to have volunteers wait. We need to consider how to assign security.
Here are some general guidelines to help fine-tune your setup and layout plans. Clearly designate and identify the reception area as the first point of contact for volunteers. Position the intake and referral station near the Volunteer Opportunities Desk, as these stations work closely together. Try to establish a quieter location for the Communications Desk, as it serves as a central hub for all information coming into and going out of the EVC. You may also want to provide a runner to assist at this station. Utilize the Volunteer Opportunities Chart and consider containing visibility to only EVC staff. For staffing the EVC, consider these options. A request can be made through the EOC for city and county disaster service workers. You might also utilize local congregations and community-based organizations. You can consider local CERT volunteers to staff the EVC.
These organizations are a great resource. These include faith-based and other nonprofit organizations, as well as the private sector businesses that are involved.
And don't forget, the first volunteers to arrive at the EVC can serve as just-in-time staff.
Well, an emergency volunteer center needs to first consider having people with disabilities on staff. That's critical. They will bring you the expertise and be able to help you with the resources that are needed in the planning that you're doing.
Now, let's take an inventory of all the tools and resources you may need during setup. We discussed the EVC Resource Kit in the EVC Basic Operations video. Review its contents so that you're familiar with the Quick Start Guide, EVC setup procedures, and flowchart for layout. Use the EVC checklist to reference staff positions, and use vests and lanyard tags to quickly identify roles and responsibilities. Pop-up tents may be used for easy identification, while EVC station signs and banners provide necessary reference points.
When setting up an EVC, I would use my resource kit And then I have a tub that has signs, pens, pencils, paper, rubber bands. I also have 4 tables and numerous chairs. I have a pup tent and a map of our town.
And of course, there is lots of helpful information available on the EVC website, www.evc-santaclaracounty.org. While an EVC manager must oversee many things, your priorities center on communication and tracking. Consider this. Do you believe it's the role of the EVC manager to handle press inquiries? Following EOC communication protocols for public information is essential. Work with your jurisdiction's Public Information Office or Joint Information Center to disseminate appropriate information.
An Emergency Volunteer Center manager kind of coordinates with the Emergency Operations Center by, one, maybe identifying how many people have shown up. So from a logistics standpoint, how many spontaneous convergent volunteers are really available?
You're dealing with a public information officer and trying to get the word out, like, we don't need any more volunteers in this area, this is where we need them.
In some instances, the EVC manager may delegate a PIO or ask the assistant manager to fulfill this role. All incoming and outgoing messages are logged using the message form. Public messaging templates have been created and can be found in the operational area and city plans. Easily adapt them as needed during a time of disaster. Consider this. As an EVC manager, you have completed a message template announcing the location of your EVC. What is the possible consequence of a typo on the location address? While it's important to verify all information, pay particularly close attention to any details regarding location. This type of misinformation can misidentify an EVC location, place volunteers in harm's way, or deploy volunteers on routes with road closures. To track and collect EVC data is a major undertaking that requires consistency and ultimately a great deal of collaboration.
It's critical to collect the actual volunteer assignments that are being requested by the various agencies. So not only do we want to collect information from the volunteers themselves and exactly what jobs they're interested in, we also need to collect data from agencies. What type of support do they need? How many volunteers are needed?
You will likely use this information at the end of a response for after-action reports, lessons learned, and volunteer recognition. There are various organizations that may request information about spontaneous volunteers, such as local elected officials, city or county management, the media, and the state. Take a moment to consider the following scenario. As an EVC manager, you have established your location and things are running smoothly until a belligerent volunteer arrives and begins to cause a scene. What do you do?
An emergency volunteer center needs security. A disaster is a highly emotionally charged event. And so the people that we're dealing with, and the vast majority, are going to be well-intended, hard-working, good people. However, there are those that maybe can't participate. Maybe they're going to create greater issues than help. And so we need to make sure that the people in the volunteer center feel comfortable within that environment.
There's also a need to protect any personal information that is shared within the EVC's operational procedures. Security can be posted at the EVC entrance. You may also decide to maintain and document other appropriate security measures, such as paying close attention to opening and closing procedures, or maintaining a minimum of 2 staff on the premises at all times. What do you do when an EVC needs more staff, or additional equipment, supplies, or even food and water for the staff and volunteers who are currently working? When something is needed, the EVC manager sends a formal resource request to the jurisdiction's EOC.
The best way that an emergency volunteer center can request additional resources would going through the logistics section of the EOC. They may need more assistance in management of the actual volunteer center. And maybe there's enough resources in the EOC from the logistics standpoint to be able to come over and assist with the volunteer center.
If the jurisdiction cannot help, the EOC may forward it to a higher level of government until the need is met. Volunteers in emergency situations may at times see and experience traumatic events, such as serious injury, threatening situations, or even death. These critical incidents may strain one's ability to function and manifest as various forms of stress.
You know, critical incident stress is our response to any event or occurrence that impacts us in an intense way.
Consider this. Can you describe some of the possible physical and emotional signs that one of your volunteers might display if they were experiencing critical incident stress? It's important to recognize the signs of critical incident stress, or CIS.
You know, the signs of critical incident stress are amazing because it can hit us on both physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual.
Physically, CIS may manifest as fatigue, chest pain, dizziness, or headaches.
You know, some of the physical symptoms we find when we're dealing with critical incident stress is inability to function or focus, inability to sleep.
Cognitive symptoms may include uncertainty, confusion, the onset of nightmares, and poor concentration.
Cognitive signs is we don't have the ability to track as well. Cognitive signs kind of indicate the way that we process information. So it's the way we take in information and the way we process it and the way we're able to problem solve. All of that goes down the drain. So our short-term memory is totally gone. But our long-term memory, especially around previous trauma events, is activated.
An emotional response may be seen as grief, fear, guilt, or even extreme anger.
We're going to be, in an emotional level, we're going to be very irritable, very short-tempered, short-fused. We can be very withdrawn, very pulled back, very internal, or we can be very overactive. Okay, so we're kind of very bossy, we're very demanding of the people around us, we become very, let's get this done and we have to get it done right now. Or we can become very sad and we can be uncontrollably crying.
And behaviorally, it's important to watch for antisocial tendencies, an inability to rest, withdrawal, or a change in one's communication habits.
You know, behaviorally, in critical incident stress, we can go one extreme or the other. So we might be a normal person in our normal life where we're very quiet, we're very even-tempered. In critical incident stress, we might become just our opposite. So what you're looking for in your volunteers and staff is that change in behavior. That tells us that something's, up with critical incident stress. And I just want to say one thing. When a person becomes withdrawn and quiet and they become uncommunicative, they're not talking, they're not texting, they're not emailing, that's when my red flags go up, and we need to check for suicidology, we need to check for depression, because that's often a behavioral sign that something's going on that's very intense and we need to deal with it. The first step an EVC manager can do to help a person that's under stress, as a result of a critical incident, is to acknowledge it.
Utilize mental health resources and ensure that their physical and emotional needs are met. help them to reestablish a sense of safety and security, and to return as much as possible to a sense of normalcy and routine. Each scenario will differ, but if you can address the central stress factor, this will allow the individual to return to a more stable level of activity. Solid leadership is important. Here are a few tips that will contribute to successful EVC operations.
It's not something we deal with daily. We are not police and fire that are used to dealing with emergencies. So the more you can do to prepare, the better. Participate in any exercises, go to any sort of trainings. I think that is something that will serve you very well.
Another important tip is to regularly meet with allied agencies and community-based organizations, because it's important that there's a high level of communication so we can all understand what we have to offer.
You absolutely have to delegate, because one person can't do it all. Because if one person's doing it all, things are going to drop, things are going to get forgotten. So you have to delegate.
For an EVC manager to have their staff respond to critical incident stress support, they have to model that it is okay to take care of themselves.
Finally, I'd like to say that it's important for an Emergency Volunteer Center manager to really understand different county departments and how you work within the Emergency Operations Center.
If you need additional resources, ask. More staff, a larger facility, additional supplies may all be possible if you make the appropriate request. Adapt to each situation. There is no way to predict future outcomes, so do your best, and when necessary, adjust your plan based on current information. Monitor your stress level and the stress levels of those around you. A stable environment is critical. And document everything. It is much easier to provide the lessons learned and after-action reports if you have documented information. You should now feel more comfortable with the expectations of an EVC manager. Unexpected situations will always arise, but learning how to manage some of the most likely issues will help you to be better prepared for your role. Learn more and access resources on the EVC website, www.evc-santaclaracounty.org.